Good morning, Central Texas. Welcome to KISS Community Connections at My KISS 1031. I am Phyllis Jones, your host for this morning, and we have some stories to tell. You know, this year, May 31st, will be 100 years of the Tulsa massacre. And so you know we do have to talk about it. One, we're next door to Oklahoma, and two, it's part of our history. It actually is part of both histories. It's part of what we did, which was great, and then the other part belongs to some other folks who didn't like what we were doing. But before we talk about the history of it, I'm going to let you know about this weekend. There was a committee formed, and they called themselves a Heritage Committee, and what they were supposed to do was to raise money to help give back to the city. Sorry about that. They were supposed to be giving money back to help, not rebuild, but help to give money back to some of the families. But it's a couple of things they were supposed to do. Well, they raised $30 million over a course of time. So this weekend, they had planned an event that started on Friday and was supposed to end June 1st. Well, what the committee promised was they will give, there's 3 people left who actually live in Oklahoma. They were going to give them $100,000 each because they are part of what happened and they were part of the program. So that's what they had promised them. But when they promised them this, they didn't say how much money they had. They didn't say that. They just said we could afford to give you all, $100,000 each. And plus, the Heritage Committee was using their names and all this to raise this money. Well, the families, it's one family, and then it's 2 families, actually. One's a brother and sister. That's how it's 3 of them. Their lawyer found out that they did raise this much money. So the lawyer began to ask what's going to be done with the money. And, he got that, that tap dance. And they found out that they weren't going to give them any of the extra money. Because he said, if you all got $30 million, you can give them more than $100,000. Well, the committee said no. So the lawyer said, if not, you can't use these people's names. You need to take their names off your program. Take their names off everything. So that ended up being disagreement number 1. Disagreement number 2, John Legend, and Grant Hill both found out what was going on. So they pulled out. A lot of other people found out actually what happened, and they pulled out. So therefore, the only thing that happened, that only a part of this program that went, was Friday. Friday was the ribbon cutting ceremony. Well, okay, so it had to be changed because remember, the 3 people who were originally in Tulsa when it happened, were names had to be removed. And so nothing could be said about them. Well, it's kind of hard to talk about the massacre without mentioning them. So they had to be redone Friday. So Friday was it. The rest of the events are canceled because everybody pulled out once they realized that this committee was not going to hold up to their end of the bargain. And to me, if you raised $30 million, you could have given these families more than $100,000 because you raised the money using their names. You raised the money using their stories, yet you're only going to give them a small amount. So the event's been canceled, so if you go, there will be nothing to see. But Friday was the only thing that actually happened. A lot of people on Facebook, they put there that there were threats, terrorism threats. No, but none of that. It's the fact that this committee would not hold up their end of the bargain. And to tell you about the committee, when Troy, who's one of my guests, he let me know about the event. So, I started digging at that point because I was hyped up. I wanted to know what's going on. I knew a little bit about it, but not as much as I learned when I dived in. So I found out about the committee was having a Zoom meeting. So if you know me, I was on the Zoom meeting. I'm looking, and everybody should know now what I was looking for. Couldn't find what I was looking for. I looked at every committee member, so I introduced myself. They assumed, and on Zoom, you don't know where anybody lives. You're assuming that people live, there, but they didn't ask me where I live. I didn't say. So I introduced myself as just my name. That's it. But I asked, why weren't there any African Americans on the committee? You all knew I was going to ask that. So I got a new song and dance, but they realized that I wasn't dancing back. Because my thing is, how are you going to have a committee about a historical fact that happened to Africans and not have any on the committee? I wasn't understanding that. I told them, whoever tells the story controls the narrative and you control the end. So I let them know, since they were all white, they controlled the narrative, they controlled how the story went, they controlled everything because it came from them. The lady who I was talking to said she didn't understand what I meant by the one who tells the story controls the narrative. So I broke it down to her. I broke it down to her real well. I brought it down to first grade language. So I do realize you got to do that. But she understood what I meant. She just didn't want to understand. So the next Zoom meeting, I wasn't invited. I got kicked off the committee real quick because I was asking those questions. But I wanted to say that first, that this is canceled, because if you have plans to go, you're going to nothing. You're going to that doesn't exist. Yes, they had a bunch of entertainers lined up, but like I said, those entertainers wasn't going to play the game either. When they found out the truth of what was going on, they all backed out. So Monday and Tuesday would not exist. The only thing that happened was Friday. Like I said, the ribbon cutting. That was it. That was it. But my guest this morning is Wanda Gunther. Good morning, Wanda.
Good morning.
Now, me and Wanda go back some days, some years.
Years, man. Oh my God.
So, and if you see us together, you should, not worry, but you might think twice.
Some people do get worried. I don't know why.
Yeah, me. I don't know why I don't know why either. We're innocent.
Imagine.
To us.
Is that what they all say? Man, come on, now let me know. Do I need to leave already? Let y'all two have the show. I'm gonna just ease on out the door.
No.
Ease on down the road.
No, you don't get to.
Never an ease.
There's no ease. There's no ease.
Ease on.
There's no.
Okay, never an ease.
That's not. That's not part.
Run.
No.
No.
Nah.
Teamwork.
Okay, teamwork make the dream work.
There you go.
Make
See,
it happen.
yeah, you just go, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. I know.
And the brief history of me and Wanda's friendship is some years ago. Not that, but it was some years ago. We were invited to a cemetery in Temple, and it was the 7-Star Cemetery. So, we did what black women do. Well, not all, just probably us, but a bunch of us convoyed.
Yeah.
Now, we could have all got one car, but we didn't. We decided to do a convoy. Oh, yes, Troy, we did. We couldn't, Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't want to sit in one vehicle.
So
we did a convoy to the cemetery in Temple because we wanted to know why we were there. We were invited, but, why we were there wasn't told. So we got there, and we found out it was an ancestral cemetery. And it's the Juneteenth committee. They wanted to own it. They didn't know how. And so we got together and helped them not buy it, because the train station, the train station had gave up on that piece of land. Once they realized what it was, they gave up on that piece of land. And it was just wooden, there were no grave stones. There was one from a soldier. The rest were just, somebody
Markers.
put some, little markers.
Markers, and it had been taken care of by a man in the area.
So we helped that committee own it, and it's the 7-Star Cemetery. It is we say slave cemetery, but I'll say it's an ancestral cemetery.
Yeah.
It's still there today, and a lot of people go out there to pay homage to those that were there. Some of them, those stones say my mama, and you be like, ooh.
No, it's being adopted by the Al Edwards NAACP committee as a historic site.
But that was one of the many things that me and Wanda and a few other women have done. And a lot of people have chose to go by there to look at it because it's like, wow, I didn't think one was so close. But it's in Temple. And my other guest.
Unclaimed. It had previously been unclaimed.
Well, yeah, because they found out what it was.
abandoned.
You don't want once the people who don't look like us found out what it was. No, you don't want to know. You know, you didn't want to say, "Yeah, I own it," because it made you responsible, and it caused questions. So yeah, but the train station who actually owned it, because it's right off the railroads, just right there off the railroad tracks. So, but that was one of the many things that we've done, and since we've been friends, and that's been a long, long time. My other guest is Troy Barber. Hi, Troy.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Troy joined the family.
I joined, or I got forced in, or I got adopted. Which one we going?
He became a new family member in January. When he came on and we talked about Martin Luther King, and we chose to use a topic that not no one knew, but we didn't use the I Have a Dream. We didn't use that topic at all. It's been overused and underused, but we chose to use another topic when he said he felt that he had sent his people into a burning building. We talked about that. And by sheer, I don't know, I think Troy peeped into my window or whatever. We had the same notes.
Yep.
I don't know how that happened. I guess I'll say great minds think alike. I could say that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll
Yeah.
take that.
Okay, good. All right. But he's now part of the family. He didn't know, but yeah, he's part of the family now. He was trying to creep out the door before the show started, but I wanted to let him know there's no ease out, run out, sneak out, crawl out, fly out.
You in?
He's in.
Stuck.
So, you know.
Besides, I would have to go by her to get out the door. So that
There you
wasn't gonna
go.
work. That wasn't going to work, so I'm going to stay.
Yeah, so he's part now. But we're going to talk about the massacre, and we're going to talk about why it was called a massacre, which is one thing everybody should be trying to figure out. Why was it called a massacre? Just why? What happened? Why? Just why? So I'm going to start out with Wanda.
Okay, good morning. I did a little digging and research to find out what led up to this massacre. What was the powder keg that it was roasting in that eventually turned into what we now call the massacre on Tulsa? Well, let's go back to 1918. Woo. 3 years prior, there was the pandemic, much like it is now. They were just coming out of a pandemic. In 1920, women got the right to vote. Here it is, 1 year later, and then you have a massacre. Well, what happened? First of all, between the pandemic, World War I, and women getting out to vote, you had a society of angry white men. On top of that, they had a political climate that was hostile. It had been previously 50-50, Democratic, Republican. You had this man named T.D. Edwards who was elected the mayor. Now, he was a real estate attorney, a farmer, and a judge. You had Mary Seaman, which became the first woman commissioner in Tulsa, which was pretty much a new state. The recently hired police chief, John Gustafson, was a farmer, a railroad detective, a private investigator whose appointment had been opposed by the Tulsa County Sheriff named Willard McCullough. One of the reasons they opposed that nomination for him to be chief is because previously there was a person in their custody who had been moved out of the jail, taken into an area, and was found lynched. That's why they opposed it, because now you're coming up to 1920-21, and this police department, if you can call it that, had very little weapons, if any. If they needed a ride for transportation, it was given by volunteers who volunteered to transport. This was a very poor police department. They didn't have anything. So it makes you wonder, how did this happen on the watch of all of these people who had not a whole lot for the department, yet it's one of the most oil-rich places in the United States at that time, along with aviation, because they used the oil from the petroleum they found and they were trying to make the Glen Pool oil field one of the major ones. 20% of the oil and gas used in the military at that time had to run through Tulsa. So there was a benefit. There was money going into Tulsa. But for some reason, there was a lot of impoverished people. Now you have this going on, the have-not situation. You got women out here voting. You got a pandemic where people lost their jobs. You have people coming into Oklahoma because the idea was to move further west. Then you see all these black folks come in and they're building and they are thriving. They're making money. Their anger is seething just underneath the surface. 2 weeks before that massacre, there was a middle-aged couple in Tulsa who were arrested and fined. Well, $10 may not seem like a lot, but it was at that time. They were fined $10 for refusing to move to the back of a streetcar. So here you have it. We're up to 1920. Women out here voting. There's a commissioner who did an investigation on the department and found out how corrupt it was. And all of this violence, the city officials, they selected men and made them their deputies. They accused them for being agents for the prostitution ring. Well, they accused the black porters of being agents for the prostitution, which that just he called them all pimps basically. And so after this young man who was in the Drexel elevator tripped because according to some investigation, there was the elevator was not level. So when he stepped in, he tripped. In tripping, he grabbed, he moved forward, and that thrust forward, it was alleged that he grabbed the white woman who was in there. She got afraid, hollered rape. And so once they took him into custody, the idea was that Gustafson wanted this man to be moved by him and his posse to somewhere else, but the sheriff in charge said, no, you're not moving this person out of your custody, because he didn't want him to end up hanged or lynched. So there you have some of what went on behind the scenes that led up to it. Troy, pass it.
But Wanda.
Yes.
You know that young lady was not actually a young lady.
She was
she was 15 years old. 15. Yeah, and she left.
Yeah, she was running away.
She left the day it happened. Right after it happened, she left.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was hiding, and now here's all this publicity coming from her way when she is already fleeing from a divorce from someone else.
Right.
I don't know what the legal age for marriage was at that time, but at 15, you think like a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Trouble happens, people come after you, flee.
Okay, Troy.
Yeah, like Wanda said, there was a lot of events that led up to it. The most notable for me was not only the pandemic, the women's right, but after World War I, you had a lot of vets coming back to Tulsa, and they were poor. They weren't doing well. And they, developed that jealousy and say, okay, look, a couple of miles down the street, you have this black neighborhood, Greenwood, and all the black people in the neighborhood seem to be thriving. There seems to be no black poor people over here. Mm-hmm. How could this be? How could I come back from the war and I'm struggling? My family is struggling. We can barely make it. And look down the street and you have all of this prosperity going on of a different color. And so, the evidence itself was jealousy, and you know how that is when they look across the street and you go, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is not right. I'm supposed to be this person striving. Why am I not doing it and they are? And so that in itself was, to me, gave them a reason to do what they did, because they had to get rid of that. They wanted to do it. And that just gave them a reason. That event in the Drexel elevator, like Wanda said, the stories I've read said the young man tripped, grabbed the young lady's arm, she screamed, even though, and then they wanted to holler it was rape, but actually, then there was some other stories that I read that said that they probably knew each other. They were friends, or they were in, there's different events and different stories out there about their relationship. And they to say, the young man left, and he fled to Greenwood, and the next day they came and arrested him later and brought him back to the jail. And like Wanda said, they wanted to remove him to a no secure place because of what happened earlier. A young man got hung in the custody of the sheriff. And so to me, that was just a reason for them to go ahead and do what they subconsciously always wanted to do, was burn that down, get rid of this place, because it reminded those poor white people in Tulsa of the prosperity of the black neighborhood, and made them look upon themselves and say, hey, why am I not prospering like these people over here, in what they call Little Africa. The white people call it Little Africa. We had different names, but they called it Little Africa, north of the tracks, so to speak. And so to me, that was one of the biggest things that I took away. I just think that there was a bunch of jealousy, and like you said, this underlying issue that they had with this neighborhood, that they kind of always probably wanted to do it, and that just gave them excuse.
Fuel for the fire.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That they wanted to have. And also, since, as you said, Wanda, they didn't have enough police officers to do anything, they started deputizing any white person that came up too. They deputized them to go back and shoot and kill as many as they could.
Yeah.
And when they shot, all 300 of the men and women and children that were shot were put into one hole. They were all thrown into one hole because the history of this was supposed to die. They wanted it covered up where you would have thought nothing happened over here. This town did burn down. We did bomb it, but there was nobody died. So they wanted you to believe that. So they hurried up, put all the people in one hole, and the rest of the people that lived were sent to an internment camp.
Right.
And they could only get out if somebody white signed them out of there. So they were back again in slavery.
Yeah.
And that's where they wanted them to be, back to quote unquote where you came from.
Right. Or most of them fled. Or
Yeah.
a
lot of them
people
fled. Yeah.
Tulsa to Kansas and that not, and started over in California, Chicago, whatever they could go to start all over. So most of all of the witnesses, like you said, were either captured or fled, and so they just kind of covered it up. Yeah, and that's how you're like, well, how did this just never got out? Amongst the rest of it, even though they knew bits and pieces, the whole story has never gotten out.
Right.
The whole story. And they don't want it to get out. We already know why, because when you have to look at the mirror at yourself and that reflection shows you, the atrocity that you committed against other people, of course, it's just like today, why they don't want to teach, slavery in school, because they don't want to be reminded of what they did. And we already know who I'm talking about when I say they.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is, you had city officials who deputize these people.
Right.
You have people coming in from out of state being deputized against citizens in Tulsa. Then you had the public officials who gave them weapons.
Right.
That's right.
They just put weapons in the hands of anybody who wanted it, and the National Guard, who arrested and removed people to other parts throughout the state to disperse them and put them in those internment camps.
Yep.
So you had a whole system in place of moving people, kidnapping, for lack of a better term, and holding them hostages.
Right.
And there's one part of the story that sticks out that to me is utterly ridiculous, is that when they went into, they also looted those houses before they burned them down.
Churches,
yes. And you had one of the Klansmen. What upset him is he broke into a house and there was a baby grand piano in there.
Right.
And he was that upset, nothing else.
Right.
But it upset him because some black folks had the nerve to him to be able to afford this kind of piano and have it in their house. That was highlighted. It stood out. But of all things, to even destroy somebody's house for, you mad about a baby grand piano?
Yeah.
Because that represented wealth. That was
right.
that was in that person's mind, that represented status. That even with all this organization and all this behind you, you have no status. And that fueled that flame. I mean, this is the first time this nation ever used war, the machines of war, against its own citizens.
Right. Bombs.
I mean, bombs made out of turpentine balls from the petroleum that they were from their own pipelines. They used fuel from their own pipelines to bomb their own citizens and cut their economics. They sliced their economic possibilities.
Yeah, they did.
Because now there's all this debris left from this. So even the reports that went out, some reports said 19 blacks were killed. Some said 300.
Right.
But if you incinerate a body, you don't have a body. You
Right.
have ashes.
Yeah.
Some were hidden in holes. Some were moved away, so they couldn't even say who they were missing out of their families. But by that same token, you have all these people. So the reports went out through the media. If you want to really say the true number or close to that number, you had to up the white casualty.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So they upped the numbers of white casualty in order to increase the black casualty by a few. Otherwise, you cannot have more blacks dead because that means their lives would have mattered more.
Mm-hmm.
True. But, yeah,
And like you said, once you get rid of the bodies or you burying bodies and there's no actual account and nobody's going, okay, who were there is going to tell you the truth, because it always, like you said, the victor goes the spoils of telling their side of the story.
That's right.
And you can't get the true side of the story from the African American side because most of them are either dead or they fled or they're too young. Like
Yes.
the
Or too
remaining
scared.
survivors
Right.
were 4, 5, and 6 years old at
That's
the
right.
time, and
Yeah.
now they're up in their hundreds trying to tell the story. And there's nobody else to corroborate that. There's no newspapers that's left. There's no really account of it because all of it was destroyed.
Yes.
And so because they knew sooner or later this story was going to get out. But if you don't have any record, you don't have any tracks of it, then we're going to always sit here and say, okay, 300, 28, 29, 26, whatever. And then there's no real account to say, okay, this is actually true that there were 300 instead of 28, 29, because we see the stories. We hear the stories
Right.
out here.
That's
They
right.
want to lowball it to, okay, 13 over here to 28, 29 over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got 300 over here, because that in itself, and like you was on earlier, bombing churches, bus stations, theaters, houses from the air, and that's unimaginable.
It is.
That you would destroy this community, 40-block community. Could you just imagine all of that wealth in 40 blocks? All these churches, all these
Their
houses,
richest
all these
neighborhood.
theaters. Just
Yeah.
the neighborhood, that big village that they had. I could just imagine. I could just see it there, and used to wonder. And I looked it up but I heard this thing about the Gap Band making that song. You dropped
Yeah,
the bomb
dropped
on
the
me.
bomb.
It was
Yes.
because I looked it up and I was like, wait a minute, is that where this song come from? Because they're from Tulsa.
Their names,
Yes.
Right.
their name,
Yes.
Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
Yeah, and
Yes.
then but Charlie was to say it wasn't because of that, but I don't believe it. I don't believe you, Charlie. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think you
Because
did
our
name
Charlie
that
was
song.
singing
Probably
the
so.
song.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Well,
They were
we did,
educating.
but
Yeah.
we have been known, us as a people, to tell our story through poetry
Right.
and song.
Music, entertainment.
We've used that for.
Always,
we've
always
always used
have.
that. Yeah, that's part of our heritage.
Right.
You want to know what's up? You got to listen to the drums. You got to listen to the beat. Listen to the songs, the
Right.
poetry. That's us. That is our history.
So you imagine you're someone who's working a domestic in someone's home. Let's say you're in the home of someone who is out there bombing your family.
That's right.
You're watching their kids while they're bombing your neighborhood.
Yep.
Can you imagine 2 weeks later how this individual must feel when they cannot leave, for lack of a better place to go?
They homeless.
They're homeless or they're staying with the person who incinerated their families.
Right.
That's right.
And they can't talk.
That's right.
So
say
there they
you
are.
were.
They are trapped. There's no home to go to.
But, also, after it was over with, some of the families, okay, I have to go back first. Back then, when you went to the bank to put your money in there, you had a book, a little book. And you take the book to the bank, give them your money. They write down in your book how much you gave. And they wrote down in their books, the same. So you all had matching books. Some of the families went to the bank. And I'm going to say this now. I'm not going to tell you the name of the bank. You could look it up and find out. We have one of those banks in Central Texas. Right here. The bank's still here. And some of us probably use it. So, I can't tell you what the name of the bank is, but if you look up the congressional hearing that they had this month, you'll find out the name of the bank. But anyway, they took some of them who did survive, and before they left, they took their bank book to the bank and told them, they wanted their money, only the bank couldn't find their book. And the bank didn't honor the people's book. And they couldn't find any records of them having any money in the bank. So once again, along with losing their homes and everything in their livelihood, they lost the money that they put in the bank. Because the bank is saying, no, we don't have a record of it. You wrote that in there. This is not nobody's signature. You did that. So they couldn't even get their money out of the bank. Later on, the 3 people that are still living, they went to their county office to try to make a claim for what happened, but they were told that there's a discrepancy in words that we need to know. A massacre and a riot are 2 different things, and they are. Well, by them calling it a massacre, if there's a massacre in Temple, none of you will get paid. Nobody will get paid. Your business gets destroyed. You do not get any money from it because your insurance doesn't cover a massacre, but your insurance does cover a riot.
Right.
So this issue has been called a massacre for a reason, because these people couldn't recoup any loss. But if it was a riot, they would have had to give them their money. The city and the county would have had to pay these people because their businesses were insured, but the name got changed. Many of us don't understand. Some people say, it was a riot. It was a massacre. No.
Well, I think where some of that confusion is when they took the young man to jail, Roland, when they took him to jail,
right,
there were some black people who went there armed to make sure that he was safe and
right,
nothing would happen to him.
Yep.
It was after the word got out that that he was being guarded, that some of these people mobilized, some of the white folks who got mad, they mobilized and wanted to overtake that unit and move him.
Yes. Yeah. But yes, we don't realize that a name change not only changes what happened, but it changes the financial part, which unfortunately they knew that, and the Africans who lived in that city didn't understand. Yeah. So they went along with the word massacre without knowing it got changed just not to give you
my money.
your money.
And it was going to be changed no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that just relieved them of responsibility of giving them their money.
And this is a corrupt department.
Yes.
It's a corrupt department being financed through the National Guard, public officials, city officials. It was state. It was sanctioned.
Yes.
Exactly. It's like when they started bombing Greenwood and all the councils I've read, the fire department wanted to go and try to put some of the fires out, and they were met with gunfire and said, no, you're not going in here. You just let it burn. And that's pretty much just like what they did. They just let it burn. They wouldn't even let the fire department go in and try to put out some of the fires because they were like, nope, turn around. We're going to handle this and let it just burn and let it do what it do. So, there was, like you said, there was a big cover-up all the way around, from the sheriff departments to the commissioners to everybody they all, to me, were in cahoots with it. So, because some of them were part of the Klan, and not most of them. Most of them were part of the Klan, and so that was their mission that night, was to go in and do what they did.
Yeah.
And so, it's a lot of people responsible, just like you said, from the banks to the insurance companies, to the sheriff department, to the armory that was there, to the National Guard, to all of them. Because when another National Guard came from other cities, they waited. They wanted to say, okay, we have to get with the sheriff and this before we could act.
Right.
And by the time they all got all that, they said some accounts that they stopped, went to lunch, dinner, and breakfast. They wasn't in a rush to go in. And so, like I said, the whole thing was just to cover up just something that the city of Tulsa, the white parents of Tulsa, wanted to do, and they all choreographed with everybody else to make sure that that's what they did. And only when they were satisfied that they accomplished what they wanted to, did they pull out.
And it struck fear in the hearts of the whole nation.
Yes.
That had to bear witness to this. You have this firepower for war being launched against citizens. So anyone else who thinks about it, there have been other businesses and townships blown up or destroyed as a result of this. And then when they tried to rebuild, I think it was North Carolina Mutual, it was one of the insurance companies, they refused to build a high-rise even though they could. They did not want a target on that city's back.
Nope.
And you figure how stupid they were. Because even though they had their own city, the Africans had their own city. They paid taxes to.
Yeah, they had to have, I think, like 1,000 more people
Yes.
move in before they could be corporated.
But they
as
had they
their own
paid
city.
taxes. So the city of Tulsa made. That's the stupid part. These
Yeah.
people had to pay taxes on their houses, their buildings, their businesses, the
Yes.
church, all this. They paid taxes to that city. They gave that city money, but that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
That they paid tax, because to me, they could have jacked up their taxes. They would have still paid it. The city could have made money, kept them separate, but would have made some money. But out of just being greedy and stupid, you're going to destroy your own money. Because,
They had already taken the land from the Indians
yes. And I'm like, so.
and started selling it as real estate property.
I'm like, that's past hatred. And also, as of today, you've got some of those people who are the ancestors to the ones who did it in office.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And they're still
It's
trying to.
generational wealth.
Yes. And they're still fighting it. And it's not making any sense because, like I said, these people had to pay taxes. They had to buy the lumber and the bricks from whatever they built from someone else. So the city of Tulsa wasn't losing anything by allowing them to stay. They weren't losing anything. Also, the other part is when they were building their city, their little town, the street, the Greenville, the street, when they were building it up, white people forgot that we built this nation. So they assumed that those Africans could not build what they built. They forgot. They did that anyway. So it was easy for them to build their own space, their own houses, their own businesses, because they were when they were slaves, they were doing it anyway.
Right.
Exactly.
So the assumption was that they couldn't have did this. That became, okay, yeah, let's give them this town. They're going to build a few shacks. We don't have to worry about them. They forgot. These slaves weren't born stupid. They forgot that before we were slaves, we had our own everything in the first place.
And
That
a
we
lot
built.
of the people that went into Tulsa as they were heading west, that was part of the agreement for freedom
Yes. But
after following the Civil War.
they forgot that we were
Yeah.
smart. They, like I said, somehow or another, in being evil, they forgot that we were smart. They forgot that we were capable of doing all of this because, one, we knew it from who we were. It was passed down from our ancestors. So we knew how to build, run a bank, run a store, have a church.
Operate businesses, bring
Yeah.
other people in to help them get their businesses built.
So they forgot we knew this
The
already.
entrepreneurship, that never left. It just got dispersed as a result of this massacre. And there's been a campaign against it in a lot of places ever since.
Oh, yeah. Because, like I said, they realized that, oh, wait a minute, hold up.
You think about with this last stimulus package for businesses. A
Yes.
lot of businesses that needed the money, it did not filter to them.
Correct.
This is following a pandemic, kind of like then too.
Right. Yeah.
There are so many similarities, and the climate is not that different.
And, going back to why they're not having the celebration this year, you would think in 100 years they changed. But the chamber, who has $30 million, still got the same mentality of 100 years ago.
Robbing them. We're going to give them a little bit of the crumbs. We're not going to tell them how much we got. We just going to, we're just going to give them a little bit, break them off $100,000 each, and let them be satisfied, and hopefully that'll die some of this down, and that's how it always was. Give them a
And
little
silence
crumb.
the information.
That's it. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Put an end to the information
Yeah.
because of,
We
it's
done
so
paid 'em.
yeah. They expect that the museum in Tulsa for the riots. They have a museum.
That's right.
That's okay. It brings in revenue.
Right.
But for this to be spread all over the nation while the world is watching on satellite, YouTube, and other social media, come on. That's bad for the country.
Right, and all the movies that's going to come out between
Yes.
now and Monday. I mean,
Yes.
you got a couple on. You got LeBron James and somebody else putting out one on
Yes.
Monday.
Yes.
So why would you just go ahead and do the right
PBS?
thing? Because you can't hush this up anymore.
No.
It's
I
out.
mean,
That genie's out the bottle, baby.
Exactly. We may not know the whole truth. You know, but we're good. The truth is out there, and you're gonna know snippets of what went on. You can't. This has been covered up for so long.
Yes.
So go ahead and do the right thing and let it die on its own if it's gonna die. If not, honor the people that you did wrong.
And research those city officials, man. That's where it all began. It began at the top.
I would say some of them are on the chamber. I would say the chamber that raised this money, some of their officials, some of their family members were part of what happened.
Yeah.
And like I said, they use these people's families' names to raise, again, $30 million. And you're going to say, well, I'll give you $100,000. I don't think so.
Where the rest of them going?
That's
Is
it.
it going to Greenwood? Is it going to build it up still? Is it going to disperse? You know, you cutting checks for the rest of their dependents. You trying to find people here. What's going on with the rest of the money?
And how much of the funding is really going back? When you have
Exactly.
it on your advertisement, you're wearing the T-shirts and all that. How much are you sending back?
And they got T-shirts out. They
How
have
much
T-shirts.
goes to the relatives? There was a woman that spoke to the legislature not long ago. A woman and a man. Both, I think she was over 100 years old.
Yeah.
Yes.
Miss Fletcher and Eric.
Yeah.
I got the other lady's name down. Yes.
Yeah, is it going to her?
No, but she was getting 100,000. Remember?
That's not enough.
Yeah, that's all she was getting.
Well,
Her brother, and the other lady, they were only getting 100,000. That's it. And their lawyer, they forgot. Oops, he has a brain. Oh my gosh, he found out about the 30 million. He wasn't supposed to find that out. He was not supposed to find that out. Once he found that out, asked questions. He was told, no, we're not giving them any more money. But and then
But they called it everything but a hate crime.
But they won't call it. That was a massacre. It was a massacre.
Not just any massacre, a race massacre.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Is that not what the insurgency was?
But see, we weren't supposed to. And also, this story was never taught in school.
Oh yeah, and they're trying to get it not to ever be taught in school.
How should it be taught? I'm like, you got to know how it's going to be taught. If it's being taught from whose perspective and what, because the numbers are not, the numbers are kind of quirky at best.
Yeah. And also, this isn't our story. This is even though it happened to us, it is not our story. The story would be told from them, what they did to us. So we would tell.
Have to be.
I know it, but actuality, they don't want us to tell that part. They don't want us to dive into this is what they did. They don't want us to dive into that, because if we tell the story and when we do, we're going to start with them. It has to start with them, but they don't want that. They want it to start with us. Sorry, this is what you did to us.
Yeah, this guy got in the elevator. That's not where it started.
No.
Not by a long shot.
Not at all. That was just them wanting to light the fire to powder keg to blow it all up. It didn't start there. It started with their envy, their jealous, like everything else that started against us was their envy and their jealousy about us, because we're the only risk they could never break.
And it was also about financing a war.
Exactly. It goes back to all of that for black people. Because my question was what did we ever do?
Collateral damage.
What did we do?
Become smart. You know what?
What did we do?
The only thing we had through all of this, all the massacres, the only other thing is what we did. We came from a country where we were educated. We came from a place where we were the dominant ones. Our history started 3,000 years BC. Okay, that's their threat. That is their threat. That we were here. We were a civilization 3,000 years BC. That tells you everything came after us was a copy. Oh, so that's their fear.
Just like today. That's a copy. Because we're the only people that you copy.
Yes.
When you get tired of being who you are,
yes,
you can copy us.
That's
and then
right.
Go back to being who you are.
That's it.
You can wear the afro, you can wear the boots, you can wear this, you can sing this song, you can do that when you get tired of playing your race. But you can come over and play our race for a minute, and then when you don't want to do that too much, you can go back to who you are. But we don't copy nobody else. We make our own stuff.
Because we are who we are.
That's who we are.
Yeah.
And if that's part of it, I truly understand. Like, hey.
But that's their fear. That's like today. We can take 100 years, set it today. If the three of us are known to know what our history is, if everyone knew that these three people in this room know their history.
How many did we just tell?
And when we walk into a room, the conversation is going to be made to change.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because we walked in. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, here they are. Now we
Here
can't
you go.
talk. Yeah. Let's close.
Get them started. Because we don't want.
That's all right. We'll sit in our own corner and
Yeah,
talk.
you
You can
got
over
it.
here,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
you can
yeah.
join in, or you can leave.
Yeah.
You got 3
Over
options.
there.
But
You know.
that happens today. It happened then and it happened today. And the fear isn't that we're talking about something. Well, their fear is that we're going to overthrow, that we're going to set people straight to an ideology that they can't control. They don't, because we know our heritage, our history. They can't take it. So their best thing is to either disrupt it or kill it.
Dismiss it. Period.
Because in Texas right now, you figure our legislators voted that high school, and really it's anybody, we cannot teach racism. We cannot teach about the Ku Klux Klan.
That's for history.
Yeah.
It doesn't extend to
And civic.
biology
And civic.
English teachers. I'm just putting it out there, okay? I'm just saying.
We're going to work around it.
Specifically said history and civics.
And
I
civics.
think.
Civics, because civics can't talk about current history.
But everybody else can. So let me just put that out there.
But
I
no,
said it.
but once again, no, we're smart. I can talk about racism all day long and not mention that word.
Not at all. Let's talk about the events. I ain't mentioned racism. I was talking about talk. Just saying.
Just talking. And with Tulsa, the same thing. You figure they covered it up. It was never allowed to be taught, never allowed to be talked about. You can't even find a newspaper way back that even mentions it. Because those newspapers were destroyed. Because there you go. Because there was a newspaper about catching that young man rolling, but that newspaper no longer exists. That one newspaper, except for a snapshot of
Thank
it.
goodness for microfilm.
It never.
Nab Negro for attacking girls.
There you go. Yeah.
What was the name? Of
Just the fact that they use the term nab.
Nab Negro for
Like you
attacking
snap.
girls in elevator.
See.
That was the how that the news.
Not in a leg attack. Yeah.
And then she leaves the city the same day.
Yeah, she want to get out of here. She want nothing to do with it.
And then
Because maybe if they did investigation, maybe something would have came out that they probably knew each other. I'm not going to say that.
That's it.
Something else.
Their
Something
age
else might have been
difference
going
was
on.
not that far apart.
Right,
No.
17, 16, or 19, 16, or 19, 17, or 16, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And plus, all the businesses were downtown were
He
closed.
was
They were only
16,
ones
she was
working.
15.
Right, so, a lot of stories going on, but.
And also, why was she working in that? Why was she working there?
She lied about her age. Someone had married her.
No.
Because that means at 15, she was considered a single woman. I guess. I don't know.
And being in the elevator is not long enough to rape anybody. I'm just saying. But also, at this year, when the Congress held the hearing, her name is Mother Fletcher. She was a little girl when it started. And like she said, the only thing she remember is people screaming and hollering and the soldiers coming to put them in a camp. That's all she remembers of what happened. But this damaged her for the rest of her life.
Yes.
Because she's never been able to get a job she was never able to move up, and until this day, she has not moved up. She barely makes a living. They all have the same lawyer. That one guy is their lawyer. But, she testified, and as old as she is, it took her a day, because they lost their luggage and all that crap. But she said she had to come there to testify to talk about what was going on. She had to, and it was her brother, Ellis. He said he had faith in the system, even though they wouldn't give them their money when they went to the Capitol to try to get their parents' money, because they had their parents' book.
I could see that being a possibility.
Yeah, so he just thought.
There was a Greenwood before the massacre.
Yeah.
There was that hope that you could do better, that you can raise up. To lose that is to really have lost everything. If that's all you're holding on to now,
that's it.
You have to have that.
And he joined the Army. He fought in the war, and he said when he came back, he just knew that they had did better. He said he came back and they treated him worse than they treated him before he left.
They would lynch him for wearing that uniform.
So
exactly.
And he said he still has faith that they're going to get something out of all of this. So he is still holding on to hope. And he's the little brother of Miss Fletcher, Mother Fletcher. He's the little brother who's 100 years old, but he's still holding on faith that something is going to happen from this. He's still holding on to hope. That's a long time.
And maybe something will. Because
Yes.
now it's a different
Well, now they have a
climate.
lawyer, and they have
It's
a lawyer
different
now.
climate.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And the lady, she called herself Mother Randall. Even she said, when she is one of the ones who did a bunch of research, as old as she is. Mm-hmm. Her and the lawyer are the ones who found out about the $30 million. Mm-hmm. And that upset her. And she got with the brother and sister to let them know, we're going to talk to the lawyer and we don't want our name mentioned anymore. And like I said, she's the one who started this. If you want to say who caused the whole thing to be shut down, Mother Randall was like, you can't use our names anymore. Mm-hmm. You need to give us some more money. So you forget 100 years old. She still, no, you can't use my name. Can't use none of our names. But it was her who pushed, who pushed for this.
Tell you one thing about when you go to old people, they're not going to play no games because they understand them with the scars and everything they've been through. It's like, hey, look, you can't do me like this right now.
Yeah. Can't keep using me.
Yeah, you can't keep using me. You've been doing that.
Yeah.
You did that when I was a child. You did that in my teenage years, and now you want to use me and
Again.
I'm 100 some years old. I ain't got nothing to lose. No.
But she makes us look bad. And why I'm saying she makes us look bad, she's 100-something years old, and we're not nowhere near her age, and some of us are letting things roll. Mm-hmm. If she's still gonna fight, at her age, we have no excuse.
Right.
We as the people, we don't have an excuse. Because if you're gonna fight at that age, I need to get out there too and say something. Because I can no longer be quiet if you're raising Cain. Because she's fighting not just for the three of them. She's fighting for whole generations of what's old.
Everybody in Greenwood.
Yeah, she's fighting for
it.
They didn't make it out. That left.
And don't know they lost family.
Right.
Because I'm sure some changed their names when they left. They don't know who they belong to.
No. And but I'm like, this lets us know that one, we're not finished. Our fight isn't finished. And even though we don't live there, but we know about it, once you know about it, you got to help do something. If it's nothing but what we're doing today. Because today, we've enlightened some people who are going to go, really? I just thought it was a massacre, and that's it. Because
some people may have been under the impression it was just a few police officers or a mob, or just a mob. It was not just a mob. Mm-hmm. It was a governing agency of the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With militarized weapons. Mm-hmm. And we think of militarized weapons, you could look at Ferguson.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it's like all the other race riots that happen around the country. And this was massacre, but you look at the other ones, they call race riots.
Right.
And maybe they may have understood about, like you said, the property and the banks and all that. To say, hey, we can't call this a massacre. We learned from this one over here.
That's right.
That this has to be labeled as this for us to get our money. Because, in New York and D.C. and Chicago and all that, the other riots happened.
Yes.
But even during the civil rights era, they termed things riots when only one side was really fighting the other. There was no fight. There was no pushback. It was a peaceful protest called a riot.
But you think about all the massacres that happened during this time of Tulsa, they were all called massacres. Mm-hmm. If we look up all of them, they were all one word, massacres. And now we've got smart where the name is no longer a massacre. Like you said, it's a riot.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And you think about how some of those people got into Tulsa.
Yeah.
They came by railroad.
Mm-hmm. It was planned.
They weren't just on horseback.
Oh, yeah.
There was a whole railroad commission.
On the people that you were making money off of anyway.
At that point, money didn't matter to them.
I know.
Their whole purpose of destroying Greenwood, Little Africa, whatever they wanted to call it back then, with the white people's side, that's what they wanted to do. Because that envy and jealousy drives you to a point where you no longer care about money, or you no longer care about what you're going to get from them, because they figured, okay, we destroy it, sooner or later we can probably go in and take over anyway. So we're going to build all this back, and we're going to make our own money off of it.
We'll resell that land.
Which they tried to do, and unsuccessful. I'm sure they got part of it, some of it, but they didn't know that they were going to. Took them 10 years to build it back, but of course, the black people back then said, no, we're not leaving. We're going to build, Greenwood back, and maybe not to what it used to be, but now it's still standing because of those black people who decided to stay and have the guts to fight it out and try to reclaim what they had.
But white folks, just straight up, should have learned from what happened to them before. You remember when it was too many slaves in the United States? They put them on a ship and took them to Liberia. Well, it wasn't Liberia at that time. It had no name. But they took those slaves back to Liberia to create their own over there. But the Africans there that they took, they thought that, okay, these slaves won't know what to do. We'll be able to take over, have our own government in Liberia, and build and actually run through Africa. But when they took those slaves there, the slaves held a revolt and changed the image because they became the government and the white folks were in prison. So they didn't learn from their own history. When they tried to do it over there, they lost. They became in prison, and they ones who died in prison, and the Africans took over. So like I said, they should have learned from their own history of what could happen because they didn't win. They lost. But with Oklahoma here, like I said, they hid it for so long. I didn't know about it when I was growing up in school. We had African-American history, but I didn't know about this.
That was never
It wasn't taught. We knew about all the other massacres because we talked about them. Didn't know about this.
We had heard of Black Wall Street.
Yeah, we heard of, but you didn't hear that.
Heard of it.
Yeah.
We knew, and there were other townships like that. I think there were some in Kansas, and there were others that had been destroyed because they had more wealth.
Right.
The only massacre you heard about in school was Custer.
That's about it.
That was against them.
Yes.
That was a massacre. That was a massacre. Yeah, well, he knew what he was doing. He was a full-grown man, as they say.
But as I was saying, so this weekend, look at the History Channel. I didn't say that, but yes, I did. But don't go running to Oklahoma or to Tulsa.
And instead of going out to spend money, think of ways you can create wealth within your own household, within your own neighborhoods. There are, you want a Tulsa, you want to build wealth, do it, then continue that.
But we
Teach
can build
it to your children.
We can build our own in our area, and yes, I'm gonna say in our area. We could spend a whole week and shop with ourselves. Yeah. We actually could. We have grocery stores. They're small, but they're there.
And introduce those businesses to your young people.
Because as we were walking in today, I was asking one. It's a clothes store opening up next week, and I was asking her what kind of clothes. They said, "What do they do?" She doesn't know, but I bet you on the 1st of June, me and Wanda won't be there.
Yeah.
Whether
and
and talk about it. Hey,
talk
listen,
about your business.
We need to because I have to look it up because a lady told me about it. Well, she sent it to me on Facebook. I'm like, well, who is this? I looked up where the store is. I'm like, well, what do they sell? So since it's not there, I need to go. But we need to support our own. We can create our own Wall Street. We don't have to be next door. But we need to think about these things when we leave the house to go buy something.
Buy land.
Exactly. Take the stimulus check like it was some part of the country, some people put like 19 family members put their money together, about 90, 100 acres of land with the stimulus check, $1,200 stimulus check. Do things like that. Put your money together for everlasting generational wealth, and not stop buying TVs and cars. Going out here spending money on things that's not even going to matter in a couple of months.
Right.
Take your money, either save it and buy something that's going to benefit you and your family.
Right.
And invest in something. Invest it. Stop, like I said, stop investing in things that does not going to matter at all, just to be flashy for a couple of months. That's something we need to learn how to do. And like you said, invest in our community.
Yeah.
Because something brought people from, let's say, Greenwood, Mississippi to Greenwood, Oklahoma.
Right.
To the well, not Greenwood, but Tulsa. But something brought people from one place to another. There was a reason that they were there to build and grow and boost the economy.
and
yeah.
understand that they could have that wealth within themselves. They didn't have to rely on anybody else. And like you said, that was part of the downfall because they didn't need anybody else
No.
to a certain extent. The money that they made outside of Greenwood, they brought it back to Greenwood because they had everything they needed right there.
Right.
Had everything they
No,
needed.
they did. They
Like
did.
you said, and that was part of the problem. Oh, they don't need us? Oh, man, how is he driving his car and I'm walking? And I just fought for this war. I mean, this
Right.
world in the World War One. I'm come here and I should be doing that. You know, because when you look over and you see all that, like I said, and it's amazing me how jealousy on that part can run deep, and it still does today. Don't think it don't.
It do.
Don't think it don't. It really does.
That's
it
why
runs deep.
that's why
have
you
to recognize it when you see it.
That's why you black men are being beat to death by these police officers and shot.
Yeah, because hey,
Because you all have a brain.
It's something
Yes.
inside of them
Yes.
that make them hate me
Yes.
for just who I am or what I represent. Why?
But it's time for us to wrap it up
Oh man.
because we could.
Well, I just want people to, what my takeaway is: create generational wealth, create a product, create something. Information costs money. Create information. Have people pay for it.
And do your research. Don't take anybody's word about our history. Do your research. Because if the story is told by the victor, it will never be told the truth.
That's right.
Do your research. Talk to people. And don't be afraid to bring up the subjects when they want to or they want to change the narrative. Set people straight when the narrative is not what they say it is. Stand on our truth. That's what we have to do. Stand on. And don't be afraid.
And also, we were talking about the stimulus check. I'm going to tell you what I did with mine. My granddaughter graduated from high school the other day. And I took my money, and each of my I have 3 grandkids. They got a chest before they went to college. And in the chest, this is a big box, but it was the immediate thing they need for college, included with the microwave, the crock pot, and the whole thing. But I did that. So my granddaughter, who just graduated, in her box is my $1,200. But I got stuff for her to jumpstart going to college. Do things like that. It is expensive, but do something like that because I made an investment into her future by giving her the things that she needed when she gets ready to go. So, like we all said, do something with it. Don't go to those stores and buy that 56-inch television that you can't afford to pay for if it breaks. Those things aren't going to do any good for the future. It might make you happy today.
Buy books
But yeah,
on the subject.
but do something that will be meaningful that you can look back on and say, yeah.
Invest in your child's mind and not on what's
Yes.
on their feet.
There you go.
Invest in their minds, not on what's on their feet and their back.
But I want to thank everyone for listening to KISS Community Connections this morning.
Love
I
you,
know you learned a lot.
Yes, you did.
And you know what? We're not afraid to tell the story.
No, we're
And
not.
there should be more of us who are not afraid to tell the story. Because that is the issue. Too many of us are afraid to tell the story. So we don't. The story dies. And then it happens all over again years later. So what I want you to always remember, you cannot lead a positive life with a negative mind. And we'll talk to you next Sunday. Bye now.